Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me again. Today I'd like to teach you my fingerstyle arrangement of one of my favourite John Lennon songs, Across the Universe. As we make our way through the piece, as well as breaking things down into fine technical detail, me and my furry assistant here, Rosie, who isn't asleep I promise you, are going to give you some nice tips and tricks on ways that you can arrange these tunes for yourself. As always, you can get hold of my very thorough and neatly typed out tab and notation for this piece at the links in the description. I always provide a couple of formats, PDF, which are openable on pretty much any device, and Guitar Pro files, which of course require the Guitar Pro software to open them. And if you have the full version of the software, you'll notice that I've even synchronized my audio track along with it, so you don't have to listen to that insufferable MIDI sound. And on top of that, I've included an MP3 file of the performance itself. So we're going to do this in its original key of D major, and as this is a bit of a psychedelic era Beatles tune, I've put it in drop D tuning to enable some droning bass notes to be a little more easily available to us. For the intro, we're just going to play exactly what John plays on the record. Then from then on, we're going to do our own thing and put the melody and chords together. So just to break down that intro, we're thinking D major, we're taking the G string and the top E string from that basic D major chord shape, or triad shape, however you want to look at it. Hit those two strings, and then with your thumb you pick the open D string, let that ring out, and make your way up to the same two strings from this D major triad. You know, the first inversion. So essentially we're going from this to this. Two ways to play a D major chord, and then we walk our way down a D major scale on the same two strings. So that's frets 9, 7, and then 6 and 5. And then we fill in the 7th fret of that B string, making this a fully fledged F sharp minor triad now. And then staying with the F sharp minor theme, we go down to this F sharp minor triad on strings D, G and B. This is a root position triad. And then we're adding the pinky to the sus4, which is on the 4th fret of the G string. We're going back and forth. And then we move to an A chord and repeat the same kind of motion to that 4th fret of the G string and back. And then keep that on and pick the B string 2nd fret. Bit more of that back and forth, and that's the intro sorted. Okay, now into the first verse, and the most essential first step whenever you're trying to make these solo guitar arrangements of pieces, you know, whether you want to call them chord melody or solo guitar arrangements, doesn't really matter, same thing essentially. I guess chord melody has kind of jazzy connotations with it. You want to know the chord progression itself, and the first half of the verse has this progression: D, B minor, F sharp minor, E minor, A, A7. It's worth having that down on a piece of paper, just as a little reference point as we try and find ways to coordinate those chords with the melody notes. Isn't that right, Rosie? Oh. So the first chord of that progression was D, and the first melody note is also D. And we're trying to match the syllables of the words here, so make sure you've got the lyrics out in front of you as well. The basic chord progression, the lyrics, and then find the melody by ear and put it all together. So I'm just using a simple D5 chord here and just picking out the B string. It's important that the melody note is always the top pitch, because our ear automatically grabs the top note and treats it as if it's the melody. Now for the B minor, we're going to do something very minimal. And this is another little tip that me and Rosie want to give you. You don't always have to put a full chord down. Later on you'll see that we go like this, which is a bit more full-bodied sounding and more chord shape like, but it's nice just to be a bit more minimal sometimes and pick the necessary things. So in my mind, the B minor, the essential thing, is the root. Let's get that down here. And then the melody. The beauty about open strings is it gives you the ability to cascade these notes and let them overlap in a way that makes things sound more full than they ought to. Letting everything ring. Then we go to F sharp minor. and the melody does this. And bearing in mind, of course, that we're in drop D tuning, that rules out the ability to play just a regular F sharp minor voicing. So we have to move the bass note up a whole tone. We're going to skip the A string, grab the root again 1 octave higher here, so you got the root twice. The minor third is your melody there at the 2nd fret of the G string. Now again, the open B string can be our friend because the melody goes from A to B and back. Makes things sound much fuller when these notes can ring against each other like that. Notice how I'm doing a bit of alternating bass as well. I'm going on the low E and then the D string here, back to the bottom string. And then E minor, we do the same voicing, just a whole tone down. Again, a bit of alternating bass between strings D and E. And then for the A chord, again, utilizing open strings as and when we can. So this is like an A sus2. And then for A7, we use this pretty little voicing. Bearing in mind that what changes from an A to an A7 is the inclusion of the G note. So we put that G note on the D string 5th fret, got your root on the open A, the root again here on the G string, providing the first melody note. The melody's going to do this little climb. And again, letting these notes overlap creates this beautiful texture. Now we're going into the second half of the first verse, and the progression is very similar, but with a little tweak in it. It's going to go D, B minor, F sharp minor, E minor, then a sneaky G minor. That beautiful 4 minor sound that wants to take us home to the D chord in such a beautiful way. Now up until this point we've been withholding the use of this beautifully deep and rich texture on the open low D string. We could have done it at any number of the D chords we've played so far, but this is kind of the tantric approach to arranging. You know, you don't want to give everything straight away. Hold something back and use texture as a bit of a sort of a card up your sleeve. You know, that's something that we keep in our back pocket and use it when it has a little more impact. And I think this is the perfect time to bring it in. So we go for this now. The payoff is great, you know, that beautiful rich D major chord now. We've got the major third, the 5th and the root, that's just a regular D major triad there. But now that open D in the bass, providing some real depth. B minor, this time we go a bit more full sounding as well. We're gradually building the intensity of these chords. And then F sharp minor, basically the same as before, but this time, just for a bit of variation, I chose to use a hammer on there, rather than using the open B string again. So it's important to use these fingers so that the pinky is spare for the hammer on. Then for the E minor we do exactly like before, we move this down 2 frets, but we cut the chord short and then go to a G minor, that 4 minor. And that's the melody there, but we're going to just embellish very slightly. Now that's one of the easy things to do when you're making a guitar-friendly arrangement of a piece. Make it quite guitaristic in places. And the guitar has such a wide range of expression that we may as well use it. And then stretch back here if you can, it's optional. Add the minor third to really push the message of G minor home, because up until that point we've not used that minor third. So again, just to point out that that original G voicing just was a power chord essentially. It was the root, the 5th and the root again, so no G minor flavour there until we add that note. Again, optional, you don't have to stretch that far if you can't. Now for the chorus, again, we make use of that low open string. And play that beautiful melody. The melody itself is simply which again is important to know as an isolated thing. The chord that supports the melody is just a D major chord. So of course there's a lot of options, but this was probably the most efficient way I could figure to do it. Where we're basically building it around this D major triad again that we had earlier. I'm also using the open A string here, so that first hit takes us down through strings E, well now string D, but I'll still refer to it as the E string. A, D, G, those 4 strings. And then we're going to bounce back to the D string, bass note, and now make the melody move down to the major 7th by barring it with the first finger. And And then a tricky little thing here, where we have to allow the open top string to ring out by unbarring the B string, but making sure to hold on to the G string still. And then through the main portion of the chord again, strings E, D, G, B. Notice how everything rings out. Once you've hit that open E string on top, make sure it's still ringing by the end of that phrase and that you haven't accidentally scuffed it or blocked it. Now we go to an A7 chord, and the melody itself is that flat 7, that G note. So we'll grab that on the open G string as well as the bass note of the chord on the open A string. But we're forming an A7 chord here around it, and then just kind of using a bit of brushed strumming to kind of fill things out a bit there. That's a nice little technique, very Paul McCartney-esque, funnily enough. So you've got, using the back of your nails, you kind of curl the fingers together like this and kind of brush, we call it, brush the strings. I'm not explaining it very well, but you can also then get gentle little upstrokes with just your index finger, or maybe the index and middle fingers together. It's a really nice sound. It's a good thing to work on. Very Elliott Smith as well in flavour. Now we stay on A7, the melody goes like this. And we're going to play this beautiful A7 voicing to get that. So this is just a portion of your regular A7 first inversion chord on the middle 4 strings, which would normally have the C sharp in the bass like this. But of course we're going to allow the open A string in the bass. And then we're kind of going back to that D major triad momentarily, before going back to that A7. And then again we're going to use some artistic license to fill in here where there'd normally just be a held note. And we're going to do something guitaristic again to give it some guitar identity. So I'm just getting what I can on the B string around this A7. And again a little trill there, you know, a hammer and a pull straight away. And technically you want to actually switch fingers there to your first finger on that last note, because we're going to use that as a way of getting into this G major chord in the next bar and following the melody up to the 3rd fret of the B string. It's a beautiful way to tie those chords together, I think. Also notice how I'm being quite liberal with the way I hit this string here and how many strings I'm hitting at a time. That first finger is hitting 2 strings together, really. It's hitting B and G. And then we're on this G major chord. Again, think of drop D tuning. Everything has to be moved up 2 frets on the bass string. So instead of this for a G major, we now have this. And again, we're killing the A string here. Bounce back to the 2nd fret for the melody before resolving to a D major chord and have the F sharp, the major 3rd, be your melody note. We can just use this very minimal voicing. Because that open bass string is now the D note, we can just get the A here, again on the open string, and then the major 3rd, so it's a full D major triad there. And again we do a bit of filling in here to get us back to the A7 portion of things. These are little maneuvers that again make it sound a bit more guitar specific. They give us a bit of fun, you know, give us some freedom. You know, as Rosie was pointing out earlier, these maneuvers just make things sound a bit more guitaristic, and they're fun to throw in, of course. They're also the kind of thing you might hear a bass line do in the background to tie chords together. And we just kind of embellish that kind of idea. And now we're back on A7. Same as before. This nice little tie-in to the G major, and then the D major chord to finish the chorus. Notice how again I'm letting things really ring. This B string was still active, and I think in some way or another the open G was still just an echo in the background there. So you want to be very careful with your finger positions, make sure you're really hooking over and not blocking strings out. Now for this arrangement I've abridged the structure a little bit. You know, we're not doing all of the verses and all of the choruses, we're just doing a kind of a shortened version of it. And there's a different maneuver he includes in one of the verses. basically just switching around when you go to the 4 minor versus the A7. If you want to be really lazy, you could simply play verse 1 again here, and very few people would even know the difference. But if we're being really specific, this is how we're going to treat verse 2. We're thinking D, B minor, F sharp minor, and then, like I say, this time E minor to G minor. Whereas that's how we finished verse 1, that's how we're starting verse 2. Melody-wise, very similar to before. But now that we've unlocked the ability to use this open low D string, we're going to keep helping ourselves to big portions of it. Again, that minimal kind of B minor 7 voicing like before. F sharp minor, same as before with the alternating bass. I think Rosie was just being helpful and reminding me that we're actually doing something slightly more involved with the alternating bass this time. Is that right, Rosie? Yeah, I think that's right. So the thumb is going 1, 2, 3, 4 while we kind of navigate the melody. Then the E minor and the G minor like before. But I don't do the embellishment this time. I still reach back for that minor third though. Which, as I say, is a little tricky, so don't feel like you have to do that. And then we're back to the D major chord. Now we're going to do what would normally be the first half of the first verse, the D to B minor, F sharp minor, E minor. Again, a lot of alternating bass, just getting a bit more regular with the pattern now. The melody, just using a sneaky little hammer-on in there. And then for the A chord, because of how he phrases the lyrics here, and remember we are trying to step into the shoes of the syllables of the words, we play this. So that's the A sus2 to A7 with this voicing that you've probably seen me use a good few times. Root, flat 7, root, third. Now this chorus is basically identical to the first chorus. We're going to go back to this. A7, bit of brushed strumming, melody, bit of fill, taking us to the G chord, D major here with the third as the melody. And then again we use that pretty little fill here on the D chord, taking us back round to this A7 melody, a little fill to the G, and then that nice rich D major again here. You'll notice that sometimes with the rakes I'm using my thumb, other times I'm using that peel technique that I often talk about, which is a really important skill to learn, especially for fingerstyle guitar. Obviously you don't want to overuse it, but it's nice to be able to deliver a chord in that beautiful way. To practice that, I'd recommend just doing something like this D major triad here, you know, the 4th fret, 2nd fret, 3rd frets of strings D, G, B, and the thumb playing the open bass note here, and simply practice separating the chord out like this. First priority is to make sure all the notes are equal in volume and are timed evenly, and then just gradually work on speeding it up. Eventually it becomes kind of a flick of the fingers that curl up into the palm of your hand. Now for the outro we're going to use that beautiful main figure of the chorus. And same again. Couple more times, like finishing with a bit of meditation. Last one, maybe slow it down and finish with that open bass note. You like that, Rosie? That was your idea, wasn't it, that bit? The meditation at the end, being so calm and zen all the time and all that. Makes a lot of sense. Make sure that when you play this, you play it with some real sensitivity. Let spacers breathe, don't rush things and make things sound too compact. Allow time to stretch a little bit. You know, as Segovia used to say, when it comes to this ebb and flow of time feel, make sure that what you put in, you take out, and vice versa. So if you fall behind the beat a little bit, make sure to kind of collect the beat back up at some point. It's a really nice way to make things sound conversational and natural. And again, technique-wise, do make sure to really make an effort to let notes ring out. Make sure that your playing is very clean. That's the ultimate thing that a good execution of this really hinges on, is your discipline with that stuff. Okay, so this is going to be like the first of many chord melody or guitar arrangements in this style. I'll do a few more Beatles tunes for sure, maybe some Beach Boys, some other nice, harmonically rich, good pop stuff. Let me know if you have any requests in particular in the comments. Hey Rosie. Oh, good girl. You've been very well behaved. There we go, let me move that out of the way. Good girl. Good girl. Rosie's just reminded me to do a bit of gear talk here. So this is my 1964 Gibson B25. It's become my favourite acoustic guitar. It's got such a beautiful tone, nice and balanced sounding. I've got Diodario 12 gauge phosphor bronze strings on here. I think they're called EJ16s. And it's all fingerstyle, so there's no plectrum to mention. In terms of recording, because I know some people are interested in that, for the main performance I was using a Neumann KM184 mic. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? And that was running into a Neve preamp, a 1073 style preamp, and then that goes into a Universal Audio Apollo, and then into Logic Pro, where I do a little bit of mixing, you know, just take a bit of bottom end away, add a bit of reverb and compression, essentially. I think it's really important when you're mixing this stuff to not overdo it with the reverb. Make sure it still sounds natural. Okay guys, so thanks for joining me, and like I say, do let me know if you have any requests for more of these kinds of arrangements. Some of them I'll do on electric guitar, maybe with a bit of a Bill Frisell flavour. Other ones will be a bit more traditional and almost classical leaning like this one. Okay guys, so me and Rosie will see you next time for something completely different. Alright, take care, bye.